What's up everybody, welcome back. So in the previous video we set up our AI. They can follow us around the level, so let's make sure that we can get rid of them as well, because this is going to get annoying pretty soon. So in this video we're going to set up taking damage and dying. Before we dive into the video, let me take a quick moment to mention you can also join the channel now and become a member. You'll get a special membership badge as well as access to the premium channels in the Discord and some exclusive downloads. So become a member today if you would like to. So without further ado, let's dive into the video. I made some small changes to make this a little bit easier. So first of all, in the minion base character, I disconnected the movement loop so they won't follow me around for now. And in the character blueprint, I made sure I made my bullet traces visible. So in the hero base, for the server bullet trace, I set the debug type to for duration so I can see my traces. So right now, without changing anything, if I go into the map and try to shoot this guy, nothing happens. So I'm shooting right through him, and the reason for that, so we have the HUD error again, nothing to worry about. So the reason for that, we have a trace channel set up in the line trace, and that's set to visibility. And if I go to my character, I have a capsule component over here, and if I go to the collision, over here we have collision presets. This is set to the pawn, and if I expand it, you will see the response to the visibility trace is set to ignore, so this will not respond to visibility traces. Then if I go to my character mesh and check the collision over there, so let me see, collision, and then expand that as well, then you would see this is set to character mesh and the visibility is also set to ignore. So what we want to do is make sure that we set up a trace that will hit the character mesh and not the capsule component. And the way we're going to do that is create a new trace channel, because that way we don't have to mess with existing trace channels. So let's go to edit and project settings, and then go to the collision settings on the left side. Over here we can add a new trace channel, so create a new trace channel, and I'm going to call this bullet trace. And the default response is set to block, that's fine. Now we're going to accept it, and then down here we can expand the presets, and we need to make sure that we check the presets for the pawn. And we want the pawn to ignore our bullet trace, so we're going to set bullet trace to ignore over here and accept it. And then we open up our character mesh, and we want to make sure that the bullet trace is set to block. That should be, because that's the default setting, but make sure bullet trace set to block for the character mesh. So with those settings we can go into our character base, and then over here we can change the trace channel to our new bullet trace. So make sure you do it for both nodes that fire the actual bullet trace, but also for the node in the beginning that's aiming our shot. So you want to make sure this is set to bullet trace as well. So we have three trace nodes in here. Make sure you change all three of them. And now with this setup, I should be able to at least hit him. So let's make sure that's working. And if I fire right now, you'll see I do not hit him. So there's something wrong. So let's try and find out what that is. So let's go to our minion. Let me see, AI, and then over here. So if we open up our character mesh on the right side, we can have a look. Over here for the physics, you can expand the advanced section, and over here there's no physics asset assigned, so we have no physics asset, and that's probably why we are not able to trace. So let's go to the content browser, and over here Paragon minions, we have our characters folder. Go to the minions, and in this case you want to go to the down minions and then to the mesh folder. So in here we have minion lane melee physics, and this is the physics asset that you can use for all the melee characters in here. So you don't need the specific dusk physics asset, because there is none. So grab the minion lane melee physics. I'm going to select it over here in the content browser, and then I'm going to bring up my AI base again, and over here the physics asset override, I'm going to assign this one. And now if I'm lucky, I should be able to hit him. So go back in game and let's have a look. And as you can see, now my traces are actually hitting the character mesh. So we have the tracing situation fixed, and we are ready to go and continue with the rest of the setup. To make it so our AI can take damage, I'm going to use an interface. So I'm going to create that first. Let's go to the framework interface folder. I'm going to right click, go to blueprints and create a blueprint interface. So this is going to be my BPI damage interface. And let's set it up. So if we open it up, we can assign a function in here. So I'm going to call this take damage. And let's assign some inputs and some outputs. So for the inputs, we want to get the attacker. So let's add an input, and that's the attacker. And that's simply going to be an actor. So an actor object reference. And then the second input is going to be the amount of damage. So we can call this amount, and this is going to be a float. And then we're also going to use two outputs. So let's add the first one, and that's going to be is dead. And that's a boolean. And the second one is XP. So that's the amount of XP that the player is going to get if he killed this AI. And that's an integer. So we have this set up. We can compile and save our interface. And then we need to open up our character. So let's go to the AI folder, open up the minion base character. And if we go to the class settings, we can add our new interface. So on the right side, interfaces, we're going to add a new one, and that's our BPI damage interface. So now on the left side over here, the interface is set up, and we're going to set this function up a little bit later, because first we're going to create a really simple die event. So let's do that. In the event graph, let's create a new custom event and call this die. And for now, all we're going to do in here is grab our target player and make sure that this is valid. So is valid. And plug it in, and if our target player is valid, we want to get the number of AI attackers. So get AI number of attackers, and we want to decrement that. So decrement int. So that matches up again. And for now, all we're going to do is grab our character movement component, and we're going to stop the movement immediately. So stop movement immediately, hook this up to both of the pins. And then we're simply going to destroy ourselves. So destroy actor. And that's good. We'll get back to this in a little bit. So we are running all of the logic on the server, and because the character is replicated, if we call this die event on the character, the actor will be destroyed on all of the instances, so that should be good. Now if we set up our take damage event, so let's do that first. This is our interface event, so let's grab my notes in here quickly. So first we want to make sure if we are actually alive, so let's grab a branch in here. And let's check our isAlive boolean. Then we want to simply set our health, but we don't have it yet. So let's create a new variable and call that health. We're going to make it a float. And compile it and set the default value to 100. So we have 100 health by default. Now we're going to simply set it. So grab a setter, and then we want to grab the current health, so we also need a getter, and we're going to subtract the amount from the input. So get minus and subtract the amount from the input. This is going to be our new health. And then we want to check if we are still alive or not. So we're going to drag off here and do smaller than or equal to 0 and plug this into a branch. So connect this up over here. So if we are alive, we want to set our new health to this value. And if this branch is true over here, that means we are no longer alive. So we're going to grab our isAlive boolean and set that to false. And then we can simply call our die event. So we can drag that in as well. Plug it in over here and then go to the return node. So we can grab the isAlive boolean, and if we flip that around with a not bool, then we can plug that into the isDead boolean. So that should work. So for the XP, we don't have anything set up right now. We're going to make this a simple variable on the character, and later we can store stuff like this in the data tables. So for now, we're going to call this something like XP when killed. Make sure this is an integer. And then set some default values. So I'm going to make it 50 XP. And then we can plug this in over here as well. And I think that's all we need to do. So if this is false, we can simply continue over here. And if this is false, we can also continue. Oh, really? There we go. So this is for now our take damage event. Let me see. So we're going to continue setting up some things in our character selves. So first let's make sure that if we hit our character with a bullet trace, something actually happens. So let's open our base character, and in here we're going to create a new function, and I'm going to call this server process hit. So server process hit. And we're going to give this one input, and that's a hit result. And that's also a hit result structure. So plug that in as the input. And it does not have any outputs, so that's fine. Now we're going to drag off the hit result and we're going to break it. And we want to make sure that this is a blocking hit. So let's drag off blocking hit, and we want to get an end node. And if this is a blocking hit, we want to get our hit actor, and we want to know if the actor implements an interface. So we're going to look for does implement interface. And in this node, we need to select our BPI damage interface. So select it in the drop-down menu and plug it into the end node. So if this is true, we hit an actor that has the interface implemented. So let's grab a branch, plug it in over here. And then we can simply drag off the actor again, and we can call the take damage interface event. So take damage message, and that's the interface. So call that one, plug that into the true pin. And for now, we can simply set some static damage numbers. So we can get back to this later and set everything up in data tables and things like that. And the attacker we need to drag off here and get a reference to ourselves. And that's all we're going to do in here at this point. So let's grab a return node and make sure that we plug in the false branch as well. So we're going to get back to finishing this up a little bit later. Let's compile this, and now if we go back to the, or not back, but if we go into the server bullet trace function, we need to make sure that we call this event right after the two trace nodes. So let's make sure that we drag it in over here, plug it in, and also plug in the trace hit result, and do the same thing for the shotgun branch over here. So that should make sure that our take damage event will get called. Now I'm gonna set up an enumeration to set up the direction where the damage came from. So let's close this down and let's go into our AI folder. Right click, I'm gonna go to blueprints and create a new enumeration, and this is my DamageDirection. Let's open it up, and I'm gonna add 4 enumerators. So that's going to be front, back, left, and right. And with those in place, let's dive into the AI blueprint and add it to the take damage event. So let's open up our base AI, and we want to add the damage direction to our take damage event. So let's make some room at the beginning here. And the first thing we want to do is grab the attacker, and we're going to get the actor location. And we also want to get our own actor location, so let's duplicate this node, and then we're going to subtract these vectors from each other. So do minus and subtract them. So this will give us the vector from the player to the AI. What we can do now is make a rotator from Z. So make a rotator from Z, and this will pretty much give us the world rotation of the damage direction. So that's the yaw. And now we need to make sure that we also take the account, the rotation of our AI character. So we're going to get the actor rotation now. Actor rotation. And we want to get our own actor rotation. That's fine. We're going to split the struct pin, and we want to make sure that we also adjust it to our character rotation. So we have the character mesh over here, and it has a -90 rotation on the yaw. So we need to make sure we take that into account. So if we go to the take damage over here, we're going to drag in our character mesh, and we're going to get the relative rotation. And you want to make the relative rotation. We can split this as well, and then we're going to drag off our actor rotation and subtract the relative rotation from the character mesh. So we have that fixed up. And then we can also split the rotator from Z over here. We're going to grab the yaw, and we're also going to subtract our actor rotation from this. And then if we normalize this axis, then we end up with the damage yaw. So we can save this as a local variable, so promote to local variable, and this is my local damage yaw. So let's plug it in over here, and now we need to make sure that we assign it to our enumeration. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab a branch. So this normalize axis node, normalize it from -180 to 180. So I want to know if this is smaller than 0. So less than 0, plug it in. So if this is true, this means we are on the left side of the character. And if this is false, this means we are on the right side of the character. So what we can do now is simply grab the local damage yaw again. And we want to get an in range float. And this is basically just smaller than or equal to combined in one node. So we can set a minimum and a maximum, choose if we want to include those or not, and then this will return a boolean. So we can plug it into a branch, and we want to know if this is between -135 and -45. And if this is true, then we are on the left side of the character. So I'm not going to include the maximum. I'm going to plug this in over here. And then I want to get a local variable. So create the local damage direction. And that's our new enumerator. So let's make sure it's a damage direction enum. And we can simply set it over here. So if the in range is true, we are hit from the left side. If this is false, we can add a second branch, and we want to check if this is smaller than or equal to -45. So let's grab our damage yaw again. If it's smaller than or equal to -45. So if this is true, we are hit from the front side. So let's copy and paste it. If this is true, we are hit from the front. And if this is false, that means we are hit from the back, because there's no other option left. So this is back. So this is for the left half side of the player, and now we can, of the AI, by the way. And now we can do the other side as well. So we can grab a branch in here again. And we want to check if we are in range, but this time we want our range to be in between 45 and 135. So minimal 45, maximum 135. Plug this in the boolean. And this time I'm not going to include minimum. So if this is true, we are hit from the right side. So let's copy these three. This is right side, plug it into true. If this is false, I'm going to add a second branch, and then want to know if my local damage yaw is smaller than or equal to 45, so less or equal 45, and plug it in over here. So if this is true, I'm hit from the front, and otherwise I'm hit from the back again. So that's good to go. So now we have our damage direction stored, and we can continue like we used to. So we can plug all of them into the previous branch. So really, there we go. And now if we go to our event graph, I want to make sure that we add the damage direction to our die event. So let's add an input to this, and I'm going to call this my damage direction. And that's the damage direction enum. Compile and save it, and then in our take damage event we can plug in our local damage direction variable, and that should be good to go. So with this setup, we can now take a look at setting up our dead montages. We need to set up some montages to play our dead animations. So let's go to the Paragons Minions folder, characters, and then minions. And all of the animations are in the down minions folder. So open that and then animations. And then we have the melee category at this moment. So in here are 5 different dead animations, so A, B, C, D, and E. And I'm going to select all 5 of them at the same time and then right click and create an animation montage. So this will create a montage for each one of them. Then I want to make sure that I open up this montage, and we need to assign a slot over here. So if I expand this, go to slot name, you will see there are no slots on the skeleton assigned. So let's create a new slot first. On the right side over here you have the animation slot manager, and if that's not there you can go to the window over here and you can select it so it will pop up. Now in the slot manager we can simply click the add slot button and we can fill in a name. So we can call this our full body slot. Hit enter, and that's all we need to do. Now we can go back over here, expand the slot again, and for the slot name we can assign our full body slot. Now the character will pop into the default position, nothing is broken. If we drag the little bar over here, it will pop back into position and everything is fine. So we have the slot assigned, and we need to do that for all 5 of the animations. So let's go to the asset browser over here and make sure that for each one of the slots we assign our new full body slot. And then save and continue to the next one. So they are good to go. Full body, and that's done. Now before we forget, I'm going to go to the AI folder and open up my animation blueprint. And in the animation graph, we need to make sure that we have a slot where we can play the animations. So we can make a little bit of room in between here. And I'm going to look for the slot node. And this is called default slot. But we want to use our full body slot. So select the node, and on the right side you can select default group full body. So select that one. And because we place this node all the way at the end of the animation graph, that will mean simply only this montage will play and it will ignore everything that's before here. So we have the slot set up as well. And now we need to make sure that we play the correct dead animation according to our damage direction. So let's go into our base AI and let's create a function for that as well. So in functions, I'm going to create a new one, and that's called getDeadMontage. And that needs an input, and that's our damage direction. So that's the damage direction enum that we created. And then as an output, it needs the actual montage. So I'm going to add dead montage. And that's an animation montage. There we go. So with this setup, we can create some room, drag off the enumeration, and we can switch on the damage direction enum. And now we can simply grab an execution pin for each one of the options. So I'm going to create a local variable for the actual montage. So this is my local dead montage. And that's an animation montage. So now I can simply drag it in, and I already know that the montage A and B are both for front. So I want to grab 2 of these nodes, and then I'm going to grab a branch in here, and for the condition I'm going to get a random bool. So this will simply pick one randomly. plug this into the front direction, hook these up as well, and then hook these into the return node, plug in our dead montage into the return node as well. And now we need to make sure that we actually assign some montages. So let's go back into the animation melee folder, and over here we want to get the A montage. So that A, that's the sequence montage, and then I'm gonna hit the little arrow over here, and for the B one as well. And then we can simply follow along. So C is back, D is left, and E is right. So I'm simply getting those from my example project. So this is C, let's assign them later. So this is back, and then we have front and right, or left and right, sorry. And then go over here. So C, that was back, and then D is left, and E is right. And plug these into the return node as well. So that should work. And now we can go into our die event and make sure that everything is working. So go to the event graph. And in our die event, let me grab my notes quickly. So we want to get a multicast to play our dead animation or montage. So everything that we did previously ran on the server because we executed from onPossessed, and that's a server event, and we didn't replicate anything to other instances. So we are only working on the server from now on. But to play an actual montage, we need to make sure it's a multicast event. So we need to create that. So let's create a custom event. And I'm going to call this my multicast play dead montage. So we need to make sure this is a multicast. And then I'm going to add an input, and that's the damage direction. And that's our damage direction enum. So then we can call our getDeadMontage function and plug it in. And from there we can simply play the result as a montage. So we can right click, play montage, get this node, and then we can plug in the result into the montage to play. And we want to get our character mesh for the skeletal mesh component. So with this setup, we need to make sure that our die event is also working. So we can actually call our multicast event over here, multicast play dead montage. And then I'm gonna hook these pins in here. And for the character movement, I'm gonna drag it back. And I'm gonna add a tiny delay over here, 0.2 seconds. And then I'm gonna stop movement. And I'm not gonna destroy the actor, we can get rid of that for now. So everything on the character movement component is replicated, so we can call this from the server and that should work fine. The reason I'm not doing it immediately is because that looks kind of weird if we shoot him and he stops like instantly. So I want to get a little bit of movement to keep continuing in the Ragdoll, so something like 0.2 should do. And then we're gonna hook in the damage direction to the input, and that should work. So we have our dead montage set up. Now we want to make sure that we activate Ragdoll at some point, and we're going to use an animation notify for that. So first let's set up the Ragdoll event in our AI based character. So still in the event graph, I'm going to right click and create a new custom event and call this start Ragdoll. And I'm not going to make this a multicast or a replicated event because this is going to be called from an animation notify, and the animation notify runs from the animation instance, and each instance of my character has an animation instance, so this will automatically run on each instance of my character. So what I want to do in this event is first I'm going to grab my capsule component and I want to disable the collision, so I'm going to set collision enabled and set that to no collision. Then I want to grab my character mesh and I want to set the collision profile name. So set collision profile name. And in here you want to set it to the profile name Ragdoll. And that refers to the collision profile from the meshes. So if you select your mesh and go to collision where we were at the beginning over here, so you have the presets, and if you look at here you also have a Ragdoll preset. So we're setting it to this preset right now. And then what we want to do is activate the physics simulation. So drag off the mesh again, and we're gonna set all bodies below simulate physics. So set all bodies below simulate physics, and we want to do it on the mesh. So we already drag off the mesh, so get rid of this one. So that's fine. Oh, I didn't get the correct one, so drag off the mesh, set all bodies below simulate physics. So I picked set bodies simulate physics, and I want to pick all bodies below simulate physics. So this is pretty annoying, this one. And then hook it up. So for the in bone name, I'm gonna drag off here and make a literal name. And the bone name is going to be the pelvis bone. So simply type in pelvis. And we want to set simulate to true. Now I'm going to make sure that I spelled pelvis correctly, because I'm not sure if I'm supposed to use a capital. So I'm going to open my mesh and go to the skeleton tree, and I'm not supposed to use a capital. So you want to use the first bone after your root bone. So pelvis without a capital. There we go. And then I also want to add an impulse to the mesh. So I'm going to drag off again and add an impulse to our mesh. Plug it in over here. So for the bone name again, I want to use the pelvis. So I'm going to plug that in the literal name again. I want to make this a velocity change. So enable that as well. And then I want to get my character movement component in here. And I'm going to get the velocity from the previous update. So get velocity last update. And we're going to use this to calculate some impulse that we're going to add to the character. So first of all, we're going to grab a plus over here. So we're going to grab our base velocity. Then we're going to grab the velocity and normalize it. So normalize vector. And this will simply make it a vector with a length of 1. So now we know what we are dealing with. And now we can multiply this. So no, let's multiply. Plug it in over here, and I'm going to multiply it with an integer. So right click, convert pin integer, and I'm going to multiply it with something like 400. You can play around with this number a little bit. If you set it higher, they will fly off further. And we're going to plug it into the impulse over here. So this is the start Ragdoll function, and now all we need to do is make sure this function will get called, and we're going to do that from an animation notify. So let's go back to the animations folder where we created our montages, and let's open up one of the montages. So right now I want to decide at what moment I want to play the Ragdoll, and for this animation I want to do it pretty soon, because otherwise this character is going to land on his knees and all of the characters are going to end up in pretty much the same position, and I don't want that. So I'm gonna set my Ragdoll to enable somewhere around here. So then I'm going to go to the notifies track over here. I'm going to right click and I want to add a notify. And there are no notifies to select from, so I'm going to add a new notify, and I'm going to call this start Ragdoll. And that's all we need to do. So I'm going to save it, and we need to make sure that we add it to all of our animation montages. So let's open up B. And let's pick a nice point where we want to enable the Ragdoll, so maybe somewhere around here. And then again in the notify track, I'm going to right click, add a notify, and this time I can pick it from the skeleton notify because it's already created. And I'm going to simply select my start Ragdoll notify and add it here as well. So do the same thing for all 5 of the montages. So this is the back montage. Let's do it somewhere around here. Right click, add notify, skeleton notify, start Ragdoll. and for the left and right one as well. So somewhere around here maybe, start Ragdoll. And the last one somewhere around here. Add notify, start Ragdoll. Now we need to make sure these notifies actually do something. So to make this work, we need to go into our animation blueprint. And this time we need to go to the event graph, and we can simply grab the notify event. So if we right click and look for start Ragdoll, we have event animation notify start Ragdoll. So we can try and get our pawn owner and cast it to our hero base. So cast to hero, not hero base, AI. So cast to AI base. Plug it in, and then we can simply call the start Ragdoll event that we created. So that's how animation notifies work. And now if we play our animation, this should automatically call the start Ragdoll event at the frame that we selected. So I think we have everything set up and good to go. So let's see if we can actually take down some enemies. So let's try solo first. And there we go. So he goes flying a little bit further, but that's not really a big deal. We can simply adjust the impulse, and that's fixable. So let's make sure that we have no special errors. So this is the usual HUD stuff because I'm launching in solo. That's no biggie. Now let's add a few more enemies to the map and test this in multiplayer so we can see if everything is replicating. And we're also going to make sure that they are moving. So let's grab a viewport in here and give myself a little bit of room to respond. And then I'm going to add a few of them, so maybe 4 or 5, doesn't really matter. So that's good to go. Let's save this and go back to our main menu map. And then I want to make sure that our AI starts moving again, so I'm going to reconnect my move to player loop that I disconnected to test all of this. And then let's see what happens. So we need to get a 2-player session going. Now this should work, but you never know. Sometimes I forget something. So join the session. Let's not bother with characters or weapons right now. So we can also check if the AI is splitting up between the different characters. So they are not moving at all. Navmesh needs to be rebuilt, so maybe that's the issue. So I may have made a little mistake myself. So if I go to the AI base in here for the find enemy function, I messed up this last branch over here. So if the lowest index returns -1, that means we have no valid enemy. So we want to hook the true pin up to the false setter over here and the false branch up to this branch. So now this should kind of work, hopefully, probably. So let's give it another go and let's run it. Multiplayer host, multiplayer search. And let's see if we finally fix this. So there probably wasn't anything wrong with the navmesh at all, but whatever. So there you have it. They are attacking us. Now let's see if they split up into groups, and they do. So that's working as well. So let's see if a client can kill them. So I'm firing them and they are dying, and on both screens you can see they are dying and going into Ragdoll, so it's also replicating. And if I grab my server character and start shooting them, so that's working as well. That's also replicating to the client. They go into Ragdoll, they play the correct montages. So finally we have things set up. So it was a little bit of a struggle at the end, but we made it. In the next video, we're going to continue working on our AI. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider leaving a like, and you're also welcome to join the Discord if you want to talk about some game dev stuff, or if you want to ask some questions about a tutorial. So thanks for watching, everybody. I'll be back soon with more. Later.